now a word from our sponsor, Anchor.fm. Here's the deal. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's one of the easiest ways to create a podcast. Let me start. In my first episode ever, I talked about fear. And fear comes from a lot of places, one of them being able to access technology. But Anchor FM is free. It's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. They'll even distribute it for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a bunch more. And guess what? The coolest thing is they even connect you with sponsors if you want at no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So here's the deal. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, go to anchor.fm to get started or search in your app library for anchor.fm. On today's episode of Let's Build This, we're going to talk a little bit about some hustle. We're going into quarter two. You ready? All right. It's a Monday after a holiday. Hopefully, if you're like me, you're up this morning, rise and grind, and you're already up and rolling. This is the second half of 2020, and we all know it's been a messed up year for everybody. Even if things are going great for you and your business or your organization or your life or your home life, it has still been one freaking roller coaster. I can promise you that if you're really interested in trying to make the best out of this year, now's the time, right? Even up until this point, if you haven't done it, now's the time. I just got done working through a whole bunch of coursework in the last month and a half because I knew going into the second half of the year, it was going to be a completely different story than what it was in the first half of this year. If you remember, going into quarter two of this year in March, right? Going into March, the S&P, the stock market, all that stuff was on the highest rate of growth that it's ever been, and even was on a high rate of growth up until the second or third week in March. And all of a sudden, we instantaneously drop into that recession, and everybody was freaking out. I mean, literally freaking out about the fact that they didn't know what the heck was going to happen. And now, ever since then, so that's what, March 15th, St. Patty's Day. I remember because St. Patty's Day, the weekend prior was like the last weekend I was able to hang out with all of my friends for a long time. I mean, keep in touch with them, I talk to them, but I have doubled down in quarter two in terms of growth, in terms of my brain. And what that means is I have built a whole tool set now. And now we're rolling into quarter three of this year, and now it's time to apply it. So for example, I'll give you a prime example. I have a marketing agency, and in our marketing agency, we grew like through the roof going into 2020. So 2019 going in Q1 of 2020, from August of 2019 to March of 2020, we've added like 45, 50 people across the agency. Obviously, not all those people are with us anymore, either because they've moved on or we have moved on from them because sometimes it's not a good fit. But we'll talk about HR at some point down the road, and you can always check out my blog if you want to see that stuff. But the premise is this, right? I have leveraged now quarter two, a time when I didn't have events at nights. I didn't have networking stuff. I didn't have all of those other things that are important. And I leveraged quarter two to build my knowledge toolbox and my skills toolbox. So things that I doubled down on. I read a ton of books during this time, and books that I've read before, but also books that I've refreshed on. I doubled down and went through and did some funnel work and some marketing coursework. I doubled down on building out some systems and applying some of the learnings so that we could scale the businesses. That's BPods, that's Blackhawk Group, that's Cream City Marketing, that's CC Media Group, that's CC Catalyst Productions. That's all of them, right? And our clients. So what I'm saying though is that now it's time, right? Now it's time to actually put it to work. And I know for a fact that the way most people learn is they sit there, they sit back, they learn, they don't take notes, they just watch the videos, or they sit in the classes, or they just absorb, and then they don't do anything with it. Like, I'm all for learning as a form of entertainment, but don't sit there and learn and not use any of it. Cool. You now can talk the talk on some new things. But I mean, and I've done this in the past, right? So my background's in microbiology. I was on my way to med school. I learned a whole bunch of stuff in college that I don't use anymore on the regular. Now, there are concepts that I do apply. For example, in BPods, we're very data-driven. We try to be science-driven. Our philosophy on how we keep bees and what we do to support those colonies, is very much based in the scientific method and the testing methodology that I learned while doing benchtop science and while becoming published and in working in pharmaceutical labs, all that stuff, right? I get it. You're still using it. But I am curious, and maybe what I'll do is I know this is like episode 5 of this whole thing, but there's going to be a lot of data talk and a lot of learning talk, because I think one of the biggest skills as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as somebody who's working towards something, is to spend some time figuring out how you learn or how to learn. And learning, not ingesting information. True learning has an information, like you take in the information, you have to spend time processing that information, you have to review the information. So what that means in these first three are like passive learning things, right? You sit there, you take in the information, you hopefully are taking written notes. For those of you who don't know this, when you write things down as you're learning, your brain does something really, really cool. Like, you've got all these neural pathways and myelin sheath and everything. If you write things down, your brain has to translate it through your muscle memory onto paper, which means that you're like doubling or tripling down on the information. Therefore, you can recall it more easily the next time you need to do something with it. And what people don't realize, you can type notes. I struggle with this. I struggle when people come into meetings and don't take notes. Cool, they've got the computer open. Well, one, that's a culture thing that I'm working through with everybody, and it's tough when you're in this age of Zoom and not being able to connect. You don't have people sitting around a table in front of a whiteboard, and you can't say no computers, put your phones away, all that stuff. You can't do that right now. But in terms of learning, back to learning, right? You got to understand. You write things down, you ingest it, then you have to review it, and then you have to apply it. And then realistically, if you really want to double down on this stuff, you teach it. There's scientific methodology around passive learning and active learning. And active learning at its best is if you are teaching the information and then taking questions on what you are teaching. It's a reason why the next time you go out there and you try to teach what you've learned, you end up being able to apply it 10 times better. And guess what? You actually are able to do it better than if you just ingest it and review it and then try to apply it. No, instead, this is why all of the clients I work with, right? I go, what are you learning? And I ask them, I go, what are you learning? And they go, well, I'm learning this. And I go, great. there's the next blog post, or there's your next podcast, or there's your next piece of content, right? Reteach it. Because if it's helping your business, you're going to reteach it. And if you reteach it, guess what? You're having to reiterate and put it into your own words to your audience what that information means to them. And the science behind it is that if you teach it and take questions, your retention actually is like 90%. Whereas if you just read it in a book, actually lecturing, you get it, it's like 5%, right? Reading is like 10 to 15. If you're doing audio video, it's like 20%. Like then there's a giant gap, right? And in the middle, you've got taking notes. So you're actively trying to understand and reiterate it. Like that's a small little bit of teaching, and it's teaching your own brain. But then you get to the top, and the foundation is teach somebody else what you've learned, and you will retain it, and you will be able to teach it over and over and over and over and over again. And your application of it will be 10 times better than what it was if you just ingest it. Because as you teach it, you have to actually challenge your brain more to understand it and put it into words that somebody else will understand. Therefore, your brain catalogs it and builds like a thesaurus around concepts. What I know a lot of you are probably going, wow, Brad, thank you for the psychology and brain lesson, but what does it have to do with second quarter and hustling? All right. I just told you I went through a whole bunch of courses over the last quarter and invested a ton in information and learning and a ton in systems and tools so that I could make all of our companies more efficient and more productive and achieve higher results. We're still in this quote unquote unprecedented time because of COVID, but that means that the rest of the world is going to struggle to keep up. So if you recall, what I did on Friday is I talked about using this weekend to get ahead of your competition. So what I did this weekend is I spent this weekend closing out and finishing up the classes and building out a plan for this next week. And in that plan, all I have is I know what I need to accomplish for this week, and I know what I need to do, and I know how I need to get there. And I also understand that part of me getting there is knowing that now's the time to work. I put in, I had this like, because this didn't happen right away in March. This happened like halfway through April where I was like, okay, because the first month I was dealing with personnel stuff and making sure people felt good and all this other stuff. So now this, my 3-month plan is if I stay on this trajectory and begin to apply the same concepts and the tools that I learned, the next month's going to be building and learning and optimizing all of this stuff. And then in August, we're going to be going through tweaking it. All of a sudden, I'm going to start getting to a point where the optimization and everything we're doing is going to make this huge impact on the businesses that we're building this for. And they're not going to see, we can't predict it. But I have a goal. My goal is by the end of, so I started this in June. So by June, July, August, by the end of August, I want to be making $100,000 a month through these concepts that we're implementing. It's going to happen. So stay tuned. With that, hey, get outside, go do something, and I will talk to you tomorrow.